there comes a time in every podcast where you have an idea that is so far away from the original idea of the podcast that you have to make a spin-off podcast.
A spin-off.
So without further ado, welcome to Dyson and Drinkin', the Good Brews, Bad Views RPG podcast that nobody asked for, but we're bringing to you anyway. As always, I'm your drunken DM, Max, and I am joined by my co-host, the dice-throwing dilettante, Claire Higginbottom.
I could take more dice throwing credit, but lately all of my dice throws have been critical fails.
Yep.
But sometimes like that it be.
Yep. So still bringing the GBBV humor to this spinoff. So what this podcast hopefully is going to be is, well, we're hopefully going to be able to record some RPGs for you to listen to at home. Those common of sort being Dungeons and Dragons, but we're not going to be playing that game. We're going to be experimenting with some maybe lesser known RPGs, as well as some personal favorites of mine and Claire and whomever. For anyone who's ever played an RPG, they can tell you that scheduling is the greatest monster of any role playing game. So, and as such, we're going to try to be having a rotating cast members for our games. And for the time being, we're probably just going to stick to doing some one shots just until we can, get a feel for how this is going to go. But based off of how people like this podcast and how, I guess players like playing in games, maybe we'll do some sort of long form campaign. Only time can tell. So, Claire, why don't you tell our listeners at home how this idea came to be?
A lot of quarantine boredom, obviously, but I'm a big fan and quote unquote unofficial founding member of GBBV, and I like to involve myself whenever I can. And Max and I just like hearing ourselves talk, and we like playing games, so we figured it would probably be to at least our best interests, I don't know about everyone's, but our best interests to start playing these games as an excuse to, one, hang out more, even if it's digitally. Two, hopefully introduce some people to some RPG games that aren't as well known as Dungeons and Dragons. And three, to just have a grand old time. I'm really excited to have some fun, roll some dice, and make a few laughs along the way.
And as the pandemic is kind of entering this next phase where people are getting vaccinated and reconvene, Good Brews Bad Views, of course, is back to recording in person, unless something terribly has happened since the day we recorded this little intro to the next time that the podcast records. But through the magic of Discord, we can play games with people who are not in the Metro Detroit area, which, the more the merrier and such like that. So Discord, the real winner of the pandemic.
Plus, this way I don't actually have to keep track of my physical dice, which is always a plus for me.
Yeah, the amount of incomplete sets of dice I have is
the limit does not exist.
Yeah. There's a reason they sell like Lucy's at gaming conventions. Like I think like the first time like I was hanging out with like James and Ryan and such, I heard they were going to Origins or Gen Con, and because I originally met them through playing playing D&D in James's game. He needed like another slot filled, and like I was missing one of my D10s, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I can go get that for you." So, dice, they get lost. But we can do all of our dice rolling digitally now, so don't have to worry about that. So let's get right into talking about the first game system that we're going to be focusing here on Dyson and Drinkin'. We're going to be playing Delta Green, the game of Lovecraftian Horror and Conspiracy from Arc Dream Publishing. Listeners of Good Brews Bad Views may recognize the name Arc Dream Publishing. We interviewed them back in Gen Con in 2019, which was just a bomb-ass year, like in general. 2019. What a good year that was.
We didn't appreciate 2019 when we had it.
No, most definitely not. Hindsight 2020 or 2021. Hey. So we're going to be covering what exactly is Delta Green, because when we eventually get to playing and recording games for you, we won't have to have like a good 20-minute, half an hour of being like, here's what this game is. We'll maybe do like a brief little intro when we're actually playing, but we figure you, the listener, could kind of get the gist of what's going on here beforehand and figure like, ooh, that sounds fun. I'll tune in for future episodes. Delta Green is a game set in the modern day, involving the Cthulhu mythos, as popularized by writers like H.P. Lovecraft, August Derleth, and a couple other people who've played in the milieu of cosmic horror, where the big spooky thing is larger and spookier than humans' mind can comprehend, and you are flailing against the inevitable doom. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't. Originally, this was a kind of a modern setting for the Call of Cthulhu RPG developed by Sandy Peterson back in like the 80s. Because typically, how those games would go, it's like set in the 1920s, and your mysterious uncle, who you did not know you had, is mysteriously died under mysterious circumstances, and you had to investigate what was going on because you have to stay in a spooky house to get his inheritance. And oh no, he was up to no good, and you have your investigator and your dilettante and your mechanic and characters like that. A bunch of characters that didn't typically have a lot of reasons to kind of be together in this weird little adventure. So the original creators, Dennis Detweiler, Adam Scott Glancy, and John Tynes, were like, well, what if we set the game in the modern era and had the agents, so the player characters, they're called agents, part of an organization that was involved with investigating and covering up and dealing with these unnatural occurrences. The best way that I like to describe Delta Green to people is it's kind of like the X-Files, which actually it predates by a couple years, but with the tone of like True Detective season 1.
And that's how Max sold me on this, just as a point of reference.
Yeah. It's a pretty good elevator pitch, because I think those are two fairly well-known properties. X-Files continues to be popular 20 years after it debuted and such like that, or is at least part of the pop culture enough that people know what it is. And then True Detective, part of the reconnaissance, season 1 at least, going on 7 or 8 years ago at this point, and was knocking people's socks off when that show debuted on HBO, and deals a little bit with the content that you'll find within Delta Green. So yeah, that's basically what the game is. The players are play agents of an organization called Delta Green, which technically is not a legal entity that can go around doing extraordinary renditions and investigations into the unnatural. So we typically have a lot of players that represent characters within various government agencies like the FBI, the CIA, military. But the game also allows for people to play things like doctors or anthropologists that might need to be, tapped for their, expertise in some of these more esoteric subjects and such like that. It's a percentile based game, so as opposed to Dungeons and Dragons, which has your standard D20 where you roll a die and add some number to it based off your skill. Everything is just rolling a percentile dice between 1 and 100, and if your character has 60% and shoot a gun, if you roll below a 60, you shoot the gun. There's no math as far as like, oh, does my 23 hit? Kind of a little easier.
Of math is pretty great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, math is great, but leads to slow play and some confusion and being like, oh no, I forgot to apply my +4 bonus because I've got positioning and blah 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 blah. And yeah. But as Delta Green is a game pretty much just kind of about the slow death spiral of encountering such forces that care not for man. Like Call of Cthulhu, it utilizes the sanity system as well as having like your HP. HP being how many punches or hits with the tentacle you can take. Well, sanity being how much your mind can take before you start developing long-term mental trauma from all the things you've had to do. Like, oh yeah, I totally had to like hide that body, and oh yeah, I was totally able to save that person. The mind can only handle so much before you start developing things like claustrophobia or disassociation disorders, and all those.
Fun things. It's so fun.
Yeah, kind of seeing it watch it all crumble down around you in a fictional sense is kind of enjoyable. At least I think it is.
It's trauma I can check in and out of at will.
Exactly, exactly. The game is designed for both one shots where you can just kind of go in and do your monster of the week investigation, kind of like X-Files, or your more long-term campaign, like,
Also the X-Files.
yeah, the game being designed to have vignettes in between adventures or scenarios. One of which is like you go to therapy and try to like regain your sanity and stuff like that. So we'll get to that when we get to that in the future. So, Claire, let's talk now about why we like this game. I've been jib jabbering for a while, but I'll turn it over to you.
I think I obviously made it super clear in my interjections how much I absolutely adore the X-Files. X-Files and Twilight Zone and all of those kind of shows are kind of what I grew up with at a very formative age and are things that I still watch on a very regular basis. A lot of people, their comfort show is Parks and Rec or 30 Rock, and my comfort shows are typically the X-Files and Twilight Zone and Forensic Files. Max and I were playing D&D over here, and I kind of got into RPGs, and I really like Dungeons and Dragons, and it's a Delta Green, at least to me, and from what I've played so far, is it's a lot more straightforward and it's a lot more. There's a lot less math, as we said, and a lot less nuance when it comes to well, you're this type of character, so you should only be doing these types of tasks because of this, and they're not things that necessarily are obvious. But in Delta Green, when you're a medical examiner, for example, you can say, well, just based on my job title, I know that I'm probably good at science and first aid and medical things. So it's easier to kind of make those connections in your mind, especially for newer players, which I think is really great. And I think it makes it a little bit more accessible, especially if you're also interested into kind of the darker horror, suspenseful type storylines. Which I think a decent amount of people are, just based on the amount of true crime podcasts and documentaries and TV shows and everything that's kind of invaded popular culture right now. So I think it's a really awesome game, and I'm really excited for more people to hear about it, because I mean I feel like that's one that hasn't saturated the RPG market, at least at this point in time, at least in the circles that I run in. So, and we've already played one game with Max kind of being our handler, and it was a ton of fun. I set a friend of ours on fire with a poorly thrown Molotov cocktail. Great fun. So I'm super excited to keep playing it.
Yeah, the failures of the game are almost as memorable as the successes. So
Like I know we quote unquote won the campaign, but like the things that I remember the most are aggressively wrestling liquor bottles out of another player's hands, burning her in the face with a critical fail on a Molotov cocktail throw, missing almost every gunshot that I attempted. It was great.
Yep. I was playing a game recently, ran by some friends, where I was a character who was really good at driving. I was like a former like drug runner or something like that, who now worked for the postal service or something like that. And I had like an 80% in drive, and I must have rolled it 6 times throughout the entire game, and I failed all but like one of them. At one point, I was trying to run someone down with a car, and like I just blew past them, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do like a U-turn like in traffic and try to like hit them again. Everyone but one person got out of the car with me, and then I fumbled my drive. So the consequence of that, of trying to go the opposite way in traffic, is I got T-boned. And like that's one of the things I will remember most about that scenario I played, and it was just like, oh yep, nope, it went terrible. You're I was very good at something, and I still just fucked it up.
True story, or just life in general.
Yeah, yeah. But I want to circle back to what you were saying about kind of like the darker aspect of the game. That is something that Delta Green is kind of known for. It does have a very dark and serious subject matter, as far as the way that the scenarios are kind of crafted, or in just the subject matter of it. Uh, I was just reading through a manuscript of something that's currently in draft, and it starts off with a very like clear cut like disclaimer of being like, these series of adventures involve, child abuse. Talk to your players beforehand about, what they're comfortable with, and advising players on, like, don't go into the specifics of, like, what is in this terrible folder, kind of just communicate to your players that, like, yeah, this is some fucked up shit. So it may not be the game for everyone, just kind of because of that. I'm hoping to kind of keep things more on the lighter side, but not like depressingly, overbearing. Like Delta Green is my favorite role playing game system, but with kind of the events of 2020, I had to step away from like any of the material for like 7 or 8 months because it was just kind of like the world's so big. Like I don't need that, like the extra amount of like dark, serious subject matter on top of everything else that was happening last year. But we got through it, and I'm now able to re-engage with it, and I'm more excited than ever to run this game because the original material came out back in the 90s. It had a resurgence back in like 2015, and they're just churning out new stuff at a regular basis. So I'm very excited to run some games for people.
You're fully vaxxed.
Yep.
The juice is loose among us. We are feeling optimistic for the first time in 15 months. We're ready to fuck some shit up.
Exactly. Exactly. So, as Claire mentioned, we've already done kind of an intro-y kind of game. So our hopefully reoccurring agents won't be going into our first recording blind and result in just terrible, terrible content. So, kind of got that dry run out of the way. But you can expect some of the very well-received scenarios published by Arc Dream and Pagan Publishing, as well as maybe some of my own things. And we'll see where things go from there. It should be a grand old time. If you like what we're doing here at Dyson and Drinking, let us know. We always appreciate feedback and stuff like that. Or if there's a certain adventure or something that you want us to look into, let us know. At some point, we might dive into some other types of games, but we'll get to that bridge when we get to that bridge, I guess. That failed.
Nothing like putting an idiom in a blender and just hoping it turns out okay.
Anything else you want to add, Claire?
Nope, just super excited to kind of get this train down the tracks, as it were. I'm ready to get spooky 100% of the time. It is Halloween in my mind any given day, so I'm ready to get overly scared over something that's being described to me via words and overreact on a recording because that's just who I am as a person.
Yep, I can already picture the oh no's that Claire's faces are going to show. So
They're very dramatic oh no's. We'll probably have to adjust my levels in post because I get very loud and very scared.
This is very true. All right, so that wraps up our little intro for right now. Stay tuned for more episodes from Dyson and Drinking, as well as regular episodes from Good Brews, Bad Views. As always, you can find us on all of the social media sites: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all that jazz. If you really, really like what you're hearing here, consider supporting Good Brews, Bad Views on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/goodbrewsbadviews. Find us on all podcast streaming applications. Leave us a like and a subscription if you have not already, as well as the rating and review. That'll help people find us through the magic of the algorithm. Send all your hate mail to goodbrewsbadviews@gmail.com. And as always, please roll
And drink.
responsibly. Bye-bye.
Bye.